Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how Kirby Air Riders is much bigger than you may think. So we just got a blowout of Kirby Air Riders information. We had a huge 47-minute-ish Nintendo Direct on just Kirby Air Riders. Masahiro Sakurai, the genius, the maker of Kirby and Smash Bros., presented this game and shared so much about this game. And we've also gotten impressions of Gamescom demos as well for Kirby Air Riders, so there's been a lot of information about this game that's come out over the last day or so. However, there has been this conversation about this game that has been a bit divisive. There are people like myself who are very excited for Kirby Air Riders, yet there are others that don't really think that this is worth the price tag, which, by the way, it's official. The game is going to be priced at $70, which, to no surprise, is just the standard pricing for most typical full-fledged Nintendo-published titles. Yet people look at that price, people look at this game, and they think it's just a simple racing game with not that much content in there. Yet after looking through the Direct and analyzing everything we've seen, I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. This game is actually much bigger than you may be thinking if you have been thinking that this game is perhaps a little shallow, and even if you are excited about this game, perhaps you haven't realized everything that actually hasn't hinted at or shown that suggests that it's fairly substantial. So that's what we're diving into today. Taking a look at Nintendo's website here, this is how they describe the game. Fast-paced, vehicular action. Pick your rider, pick your machine, and mount up for competition. Take on your rivals in frantic arena battles or fast-paced races on the ground and in the air. Use the boost charge button to brake and control your turns as your machine automatically fights for top speed. Fill your boost charge gauge as you drift around the bend and release it to trigger an explosive dash. So a conversation that's going on about this game is that people look at this as another racing game. We just got Mario Kart World. Why do we need another? If that's your perspective, well, I don't agree with it. Because you could have things that have similarities. That doesn't mean there aren't differences that don't make both experiences worthwhile. Mario Kart World is an open-world kart racer, and it feels nothing like Kirby Air Ride or Kirby Air Riders from what we can tell. And just looking at Nintendo's own description of the game, they're not even describing it quite like a racing game. Yes, Kirby Air Riders has racing, but it's not totally accurate to describe it as just a racing game. It's also, in large part, an action game. Gene Park, a writer from Washington Post, actually got to play Kirby Air Riders during Gamescom, and they said some very interesting things about the game. I'll have it linked in the description below so you can read the entire article, but their summary on Twitter is this. I played for an hour of Kirby Air Riders, which is an action game with vehicles, not a racing game. It is breathlessly fast-paced and chaotic, and the simplicity of its two-button controls belies the mechanic depth of constant engagement with other players. And I think Gene Park has hit it on the money, at least from what I can tell of the game, because I haven't played it myself, but I understand the game, I looked at it, I've analyzed it, and that's what this is. I don't think Kirby Air Riders is just a racing game. To call it a racing game is unfair. It's also in large part highly action-oriented, and it feels very different from something like Mario Kart World, a kart racer. And by the way, even if Kirby Air Riders was like a true racing game, like pure, like maybe like F-Zero or Wave Race, I still think those would also be totally worthwhile in the same year as Mario Kart World. You can have multiple adventure games, you can have multiple platformers, multiple RPGs. Why can't you have multiple racers? I don't really agree with the argument, but if somehow one racing game is enough for you in a particular year, Kirby Air Riders isn't quite exactly just a racing game. Yes, you zoom around and you are trying to get to the finish line for the races, but there's also a lot of action involved with your attacking enemies, dropping specials, and that's just part of the game. There's also City Trial, which is completely different. Yeah, you race around the track collecting abilities, but then you participate in challenges and battles. So City Trial is far more about exploration and action than it is about racing. And I gotta say, from everything we've seen, I really appreciate the attention to detail we typically get from Masahiro Sakurai games. There's a certain level of quality and magic that seems to be with all of his games, the Smash Bros. Games, Kid Icarus Uprising, Kirby Air Riders now. There's so much work being done to the animations and the environments and the mechanics and all of that. From my perspective, there appears to be a lot of depth and work put in here, and we will be talking about some of that throughout this video. But something some of you may be curious on, in case you haven't seen it yet, here is the box art for Kirby Air Riders. I think it looks quite nice. But something else official we've gotten about Kirby Air Riders is actually the literal size of the game. And so here they say the game file size, given this is actually an estimate, but you know, it's probably pretty close, it's Nintendo's own website, 25 gigabytes. So this is extremely interesting because we look at Donkey Kong Bonanza, a pretty big game. I'm still playing it, I haven't 100%ed it yet. 8.7 gigabytes. That's a substantial difference in literal size there. But let's look at something more comparable, because Kirby Air Riders has racing in it. Mario Kart World, 21.9 gigabytes. Mario Kart World is an open world game with hundreds of songs, many characters, many vehicles, so many tracks and different things to do, and all the free roam missions. And yet, Kirby Air Riders literally has a bigger file size. Now, hold on a second. I do think we should keep in mind that looking at a file size isn't the only metric for determining how big a game is. Like, for example, a lot of people playing Donkey Kong Bonanza might feel there's a lot more to enjoy in Bonanza than just a fraction of the size of Mario Kart World. Or you look at games like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom that only have like 10-20% of the size of other games on other platforms that are like over 100 gigabytes. So we shouldn't look at file size to be the sole determining factor for how big a game is. However, it is literally how much space it takes up on the game. So in terms of literal file size, Kirby Air Riders, from what I can tell, is the biggest we've seen from Nintendo this year. And so what you might be thinking here is that Masahiro Sakurai's team just didn't do a good job of compressing the file size of the game. And I find that to be pretty unlikely, because Sakurai's team, the same team that has made Smash Bros. For Wii U, 3DS, and Switch with Smash Ultimate, those games are huge, and they've talked about how they've really improved and worked on their file compression here. And by the way, Smash Ultimate, I guess Sakurai's prior major release, is only 17.3 gigabytes, even smaller than Kirby Air Riders. Now, Kirby Air Riders is made for the Nintendo Switch. It should have higher resolution textures, that takes up more space. But maybe not necessarily that much. We look at Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey on Switch 1 takes up 5.6 gigabytes. They enhanced the visuals a little bit, the resolution is higher. It's at 5.7 gigabytes. Now, the textures probably aren't that detailed to begin with, so there's not that much extra data fit in there, but it is curious that an enhanced version of Mario Odyssey is only a little bit larger. And then you look at Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is made by the same team. It is bigger than Mario Odyssey, but not so much bigger, not even double. And so I'm not here trying to argue that Kirby Air Riders has more content than Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, probably one of the most densely packed games in terms of content that's ever come out. I think the higher file size in large part does have to do with probably more detailed, higher resolution assets. But as we've gone over, that doesn't seem to make that much of a difference from what we've seen so far of Nintendo games. I'm more so thinking about that jump from Mario Odyssey to Donkey Kong Bonanza. Even though they're different games, they do have similar lengths and levels of content. Ultimately, what I'm getting at here is that Kirby Air Riders seems like it probably has to have a decent amount of content. So when I see people saying the game only has 2 modes and 4 tracks, I think they're not taking many things into account here. So on the note of the 4 tracks thing, I keep seeing people say 4 tracks, and that just blows my mind because there's more than 4 tracks. So some people probably have seen this screenshot of the track selection screen, see 4 tracks, and jump to the conclusion that these are the only tracks in the game. And let me just say straight up, we already know 100% this is not the case, because literally before showing this screenshot and going over these 4 stages, we saw Sakurai play through an entirely different water stage. So we know for sure there's at least 5 playable stages for the typical air ride races. But we've also seen another stage throughout the Direct, and this looks to be at least some kind of practice stage here. And I've looked through it all, this seems to be completely different from any of the 5 stages that we have seen. So this is likely a 6th stage, at least a practice stage. possibly a stage we can unlock later on to play as also some kind of typical air ride stage. But when you look at this screen here, there is plenty of room to add more stages. I mean, simply the fact that we know that there's a water stage, they have to fit that somewhere else on this screen, because that question mark right there is most likely a random symbol, because this is being made by Masahiro Sakurai and his team, who make Smash Brothers, and when we know the Smash Brothers games, the question mark means random for both the stages and the characters. And like the Smash Brothers games, there's a lot of things you can unlock and add, and will be added to those pages later on. And clearly, Kirby Air Riders shares a lot of similarities to Smash Bros. And so on. That's kind of part of the Sakurai magic. The UI elements, the depth, the customization options. And so there's going to be more that can fit on here. And assuming they don't, like, decrease the dimensions of the selection options here, I can easily see them adding 10 more stages to the 4 that are shown here. So in other words, an additional 9 from the 5 confirmed stages. And so maybe one of those stages is that practice stage I talked about, but then that would mean we still have 8 more stages we haven't seen at all, a total of 14 stages. Now you might be wondering why I'm coming up with this number, because I'm just looking at things in terms of adding things to the top and the bottom. If you look to the right, maybe they could fit on more, but I would imagine for this type of screen, they don't want to completely obscure the stage that you're selecting through. But you'll notice they kind of already starting to obscure it where that last stage ends on the screen, because they have all these different like rectangles and little lines and colors. And shortly after that point, you can see most of the stage clearly. So I think what's going to happen is that they cuts off there, and we're looking at 14 stages total. It would be 15 boxes when you include the random option. Something else that we've seen that is similar to Smash Bros. For Kirby Air Riders is that there is an increased level of customization. As you see from the screen here, you can change the tempo of the game. There are varying levels of versus formatting, the number of riders, the number of laps. So maybe this game ends up having 14 tracks as the stage selection screen seems to be suggesting. And you still don't think that's enough. There's still a greater level of customization you get from these tracks than you would from other games. But the depth goes far beyond the tracks here. We also have the roster. So in the original Kirby Air Ride, you just had Kirby and Meta Knight and King Dedede. But in Kirby Air Riders, one of the reasons why they're calling it Air Riders is because it's more than just Kirby. It's different Air Riders. And so you have Kirby and his different colors, but then you have all these other characters that have been confirmed. So including Kirby, we have 12 confirmed characters for the roster. But similar to the stage selection screen, there's quite a bit of space to be added. There looks like there's space for 3 more rows. Now, one of the spaces for the 4th row is taken up by the random slot, so instead of accounting for another 12, maybe we could be looking at another 11 characters that could be part of the roster here. But coming back to how Kirby has multiple colors, you see that you can change the colors with L and R down there at the bottom. And also looks like with the X button, you can add different hats and things, so there could be some customization to the clothing we wear. And I wonder if that will impact stats as well. Because as you see, they show the stats with some pretty good detail. And so depending on what colors or hat or clothing options you pick, that can vary. We already know that the different colors of Kirby actually have different special abilities. But we actually already know about a whole bunch of alternate colors thanks to the Nintendo of Japan website. As you see here, here's Kirby, and here are the other colors. It's not just the 5 we just talked about, there's more. So you got yellow, green, red, purple, blue, and gray. Now what's interesting is that Pink Kirby has his main ability, then yellow and green share an ability, red and purple share an ability, blue and gray share an ability. But it's not just Kirby with alternate colors. Like, these are the same colors from Smash, by the way. But anyways, you have King Dedede. He has several colors. There you go. Meta Knight has several colors. This one looks awesome. And, well, everyone has at least one alternate form. So, yeah. We have alternate colors here for these characters. That's nice. I mean, seriously, we have to start thinking about what is it about this game that gives it such a large file size. If there's more stages, if there's characters with varying different abilities and clothing options and color options, it starts to become a bit easier to understand why this game is so big. We've actually also seen there's a variety of vehicle options. They continue to show and reveal more vehicles throughout the Direct, not all in one go. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's more vehicles that they'll be showing off at a later date, as Sakurai does say there's still more to show for this game. But something else I'm left wondering on is how we unlock these different characters, and I have an idea here. So we see Starman as one of the characters, and we actually see Starman is introduced just walking along a track. And so Starman is a common enemy from prior Kirby games. And he's not even the only one that's a part of this roster here, right? So it comes with the implication that similar to Mario Kart World, there are going to be common enemies added as playable characters. And actually, we see a little bit of gameplay in the Air Riders Direct where Kirby is racing alongside this Knight character here. I believe this is a variation of the Blade Knight, a common enemy from prior Kirby games. The design doesn't seem to match up exactly, but it seems close. It's at least a related character. And this character is even already racing around on a vehicle similar to Kirby's Warp Star, so it doesn't seem like there's much work else needed to be done to make this kind of character playable. I wouldn't be surprised if this character's playable and it's just another common enemy like Starman, and perhaps similar to Mario Kart World, how you interact with these random enemies on stage could lead to you unlocking these characters. But now let's talk about City Trial, because many people feel that City Trial is the biggest draw of the Kirby Air Rider series. That was the main reason people kept going back to Kirby Air Rider from Nintendo GameCube, and they dedicated a lot of time to City Trial in Smash Ultimate. Sakurai made it clear that this is a big part to the game, if not even the biggest part to the game. And yeah, I've seen some people complain that there's only one City Trial map, but this map actually is fairly significant in size. Like, Sakurai does make sure to mention it's the biggest City Trial map yet. And when you look through it, and looking at the island, it's not just what you see on the surface, there are underground levels as well. There are different layers to the verticality. But I noticed some things that Sakurai was intentionally hiding during the Direct. Sakurai makes mention to the volcano, and he says he won't go in there because he wants to keep some surprises for later. I'm paraphrasing here. And then there's also this point where he bumps into the Sky Island, and he intentionally doesn't show that area either. So there are some parts he intentionally did not show off for whatever reason, probably just because he doesn't want to spoil everything about the map already, but it does lead me to wonder if there's something special about these parts to the map. We saw Sakurai race through pretty much the entirety of the map in one go, so it's not really that large, but you are racing around with speed, and it's not just about racing around. Like, there's still a lot to sort of sift through and look around it and discover. But also, there's a lot of variation to City Trial depending on with each and every playthrough. There's different things that you find randomly throughout the map. There are different events that occur that lead to all sorts of different things happening, and then there are different stadium matches that happen at the end. So there's a lot of variety and variation there, and the big idea with this is that it's meant to have a high degree of replayability like the original City Trial. No two City Trial experiences are going to be exactly the same. And just something that I saw that I really appreciated is that Sakurai goes over how when you're doing the air ride races or when you're doing the City Trial, before your competitors are done, you can jump right into the next one. They keep up that flow of gameplay. So Kirby Air Riders looks like it's designed as very pick up and play, jump in, go from match to match very quickly. And I think that's going to make this game really fun and highly replayable. And yet, even with all that, I do think some people will feel that that's still not quite enough. Just 2 modes, even if those 2 modes do seem to be pretty fun. But as I already noted, Sakurai said in the Direct that there's still more to show, so why are we assuming everything they've shown is all there is to show? This is literally the first time they've shown off the game. There's going to be more. And Sakurai even teases more than once actually, which we'll be getting to in a moment here. But something I want to talk about are just the other modes, because I do think there are potentially more. So we see this screen here, and this is the Lessons tab, but the Lessons tab has Basics, Advanced, and Copy abilities, which would be just important for overall gameplay, would work really well for the Air Ride mode, but then there's a separate Lessons tab for City Trial, likely so you can have a better understanding of what to do in that mode. And there's a blank space there. And I think this is interesting. Some people might just jump to the conclusion that that's all there is. But if that was all there is, I don't think they would have designed this menu in this way. If that's all there was, all 4 squares would be organized evenly, and they're not. One is bigger to the left because it's the basics, it's the main one, and they just leave a blank space there. I think it's because there's something else. And something that people have been wondering about is where is Top Ride, the 3rd mode from the original Kirby Air Ride. We haven't seen it here. However, with the official Kirby Air Riders page, there is an icon that has like a toy-like figurine version of Kirby on his Warp Star. Some people have speculated that this might be our first hint or look at the Top Ride mode, and so this other alternative minigame-like mode could be making a comeback here, and we may see a lessons tab on that mode later on once they reveal it. Everything we've seen from Kirby Air Riders here seems to be treating the game as a proper follow-up to Air Rider, so I would have to think that they would include the other mode of the game. They've only included 2 of the 3, I would think the other would be in here as well, and we have some evidence to support the theory. But even beyond that, I think there's likely still going to be more, because most Kirby games have a variety of minigames to play, and so there could also be a minigame section on top of Top Ride, not even just Top Ride, but beyond that, possibly, right? I'm not saying for sure. But the bigger thing here that was teased at the end of the Direct is perhaps a story mode of sorts, because we get a very Smash-like cutscene at the end of the Air Riders Direct, something very similar to what we would have seen when they were revealing a new character, or perhaps something tying into some sort of story. And so there's this character here, and we're not quite sure who they are. But people have some theories. Some people are speculating that it has to do with Dark Matter, a recurring Kirby boss. Because Dark Matter has different forms. There is the Dark Matter blade form, and people have noted that the hair seems to be similar. But there is something else a bit odd about this character. Like, yes, they have just the one glowing eye similar to Dark Matter, but this character has more going on here. The headpiece looks very similar to King Dedede's headpiece, and even the gloves look very similar as well. So this looks to be some kind of evil one-eyed variation of the King Dedede. Could it be that Dark Matter has possessed King Dedede? That's possible. Maybe like an alternate version of King Dedede from another realm, another universe, which isn't really that much of a stretch at all for Kirby things, because star-crossed worlds, other universes, that's all possible. And yeah, I am suggesting here that, yeah, maybe there's some sort of tease here of the content in Forgotten Land Star-Crossed World that we're getting in just a couple weeks here. The new Switch 2 Edition content could be a hint towards that. Like, there's gotta be a final boss there, so there may be something to that idea. Now, some people have also noted that GUI has something else going on as well that looks like Dark Matter, but GUI is based off the same material of Dark Matter, not actually Dark Matter, and so I think that's just a reference to that. Anyway, I think at the very least it's safe to say this is probably going to be another playable character, but it could also be a hint towards some kind of story mode of sorts. Maybe that's how you would go about unlocking more stages in the game, and perhaps this character. And so having gone through all of that, I feel confident that Kirby Air Riders is going to be a pretty good package here. I'm not here trying to argue that Kirby Air Riders is going to be Game of the Year, but you know what? For some people, it probably will be their personal Game of the Year. I'm very excited for this one. I think it's going to be a really fun game that we're going to cherish for a long time, and honestly, I think people are sleeping on it. And it's much bigger than many are thinking. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.